Okay, what else? Part 2, since that was about 10 minutes. I just get bapping. I just get yapping. Virgil constantly saying that he's wrong because he's pagan, and the idea of the sort of equanimity, and yeah, I wrote about this a little bit, but like the whole idea of the whole purgatory and inferno too is like based on it's called like misura, or it's called like the mean. Like he doesn't want you to be on either extreme of, for example, like avarice or prodigality. You shouldn't be too greedy, and you shouldn't be too like ascetic. You should be somewhere in the middle, and that's like a more moral position. So you have this sense of equanimity and loss and gain, and you're not like shaken to either extreme of like behavior. And so I see that a lot in this song specifically too, and it's just like life is a song that ends with it ends. Like that sounds a little bit like a platitude, and it sounds kind of like emotionally unattached or like weirdly apathetic. But I could see how it also could apply to this like idea of equanimity and loss and gain, or like since it also is a very alchemical kind of song, it could be like approaching that level of enlightenment that is beyond like reconciling opposites. So it's not as if you've been through this big like life, death, rebirth cycle, then you're less shaken by things, by life ending kind of thing. And let's see. And even the word, I just thought of this too. Even the mama use when I was talked about Statius, this poem. I can't talk. This poet, Roman poet, who this song reminds me of a lot, who Dante meets later in Purgatory, who has just finished his purgation in Purgatory, and it makes this dramatic entrance by like every time a soul reaches their final, like are ready to go to paradise, there's like a whole earthquake on the mountain, and that's like sort of recalling symbolically apparently what happened when Jesus created, quote unquote, created heaven through his sacrifice. He created an earthquake in hell when my favorite, this is a digression, but it's very funny. It was a big deal in medieval Christianity, Catholicism, that Jesus went down to hell, like while he was pretending to be dead in the tomb. He actually went down to hell and took a lot of the like really righteous people out of hell. Like I don't know why they, like these biblical patriarchs that were hanging out in hell. Definitely a theological clusterfuck. But whatever. It's funny, and it's like so clearly a mapping of like a Hermes. I never can say that word. Chthonic. I don't think you pronounce the C. I think it's just chthonic. Like the chthonic Hermes function. Hermes and Mercury is always like going in the heavens, going in the earth, and then going into the underworld as like a circle. So he's able to go in all these different realms. Non-binary king, Hermes. Anyway, but yeah, that's like an earthquake. So they say, why is there an earthquake on this mountain? And Statius is like, ta-da! And then he's extremely hyped about Virgil. And Virgil happens to be there because Virgil is Dante's guide, and he doesn't even know it's Virgil. And he's like, oh my god, I'm so excited to go to heaven. The only thing I would change is if I could just meet Virgil. And then Virgil's like, don't say anything. But then Dante kind of like starts laughing, and Statius is like, why are you laughing? And he's like, because Virgil's literally right here. And then they like become pals. But he refers to Virgil as he says like Virgil's poem, the Aeneid, was his mother and his source of like spiritual food. It's like an inherently moral poem, but it's also, he said Virgil was, he sort of misinterprets something Virgil writes in this thing called the Fourth Eclogue, where Virgil is like prophesying a Messiah, but it turns out people think it's just like one of Augustus's friends that he was trying to like butter up his son. But Statius took that to mean Jesus. So he's like, I looked into this Jesus guy and he was great. And then he like becomes a secret Christian. He gets baptized in secret, and he's sort of like hearing about the Gospels or something. And that's part of why he's on. But then they're like, you weren't proud enough as a Christian. Because it was like an underground cult at that time. It didn't become the state religion for like much longer time. And that's part of why he has to spend years on the the prodigality terrace. But he's like, but you got me. I would have been in limbo. And Virgil's like, fine, whatever. He's like, I guess since you are like a huge fan of me, I have to be a fan of you. I guess I don't want to ruin the mood. So that's part of what that's interesting, that like mom, obviously, could mean it, but it's interesting that mom is, he uses that term because he refers to Virgil as his mom. Lightning strikes, which I mentioned in my discussion of Florida, but lightning strikes when the devil misses out on a soul, who turns to the last minute, starts to regret its sinful behavior. And there's also fiery lightning that comes, it sort of like goes up. So it's actually like a cosmic ray in that way, like that physical thing. Those like neutrinos or whatever, in quantum physics, but there's it's like fire lightning that goes up from the ground as Dante ascends to paradise. So two sort of lightning things as we're on the cusp of potentially paradise. More lightning is invoked. Sleepless in the onyx night. Sleep is a very important theme in Purgatory, where Dante does not sleep the entire time he's Inferno. He does faint many times, but that's different from falling asleep. He's just constantly passing out, but he's not like, there's no sense of time and there's no sense of night and day, because there's essentially in a hole in the ground. Can't see the sky. It's just like an eternal night. And there's no place to rest in the Inferno anyway. But he spends about 3 nights in Purgatory on the mountain. There's that 3 again, and he finds like different places to sleep, and then he has all these crazy dreams. But sleeping in the onyx night kind of reminds me of that. And then onyx going into like the idea of the alchemical like rock bottom state called the nigredo, which is like the burnt up calcified state. When you have like if you're trying to turn, essentially a chemical process is trying to turn lead into gold, and so what they did, like with just playing around, was like burning it, and so it would like char it and then reduce it to this very like burnt down, they call it the prima materia, or like the pure sort of essence, to gradually like try to do all these different things to turn it into gold. So anytime you see like coal or like things like that are like deep in the ground and like this deep sort of like essence, that's like the first stage of alchemy. And then opalite, and like the idea of these O's is interesting too, like the onyx and the opalite, and then the O. Oh my, no one. The assonance. That was a digression. But yeah, the sky is opalite, and opalite reminds me of the crystalline sphere, which is a thing in in paradise. And the idea of creating, like, Statius reminded me of Statius, because he says, like, you were a lamp for me in the darkness, and the idea of, like, light, salvation, and, like, this path toward heaven being the path of light, and he was in this darkness, and he had this, like, ability to create light for himself, I think is relevant. And let's see. And he's like this trendsetter because he's a pagan who becomes a secret Christian. You have to make your own sunshine. Sunshine in Purgatory is theologically related to Jesus, and like the idea of the soul invictus, and them putting Jesus' birthday on Christmas, or right near this winter solstice, when the sun is the weakest, and then the sun is the brightest at the vernal equinox, when Easter is, when there's the resurrection. They very much mapped it onto like the solar journey, which was like the whole pagan wheel of the thing. Pagan wheel of the year, not wheel of the thing. Like the equinoxes and the solstices are all about, or like map the pagan wheel of the year. Tied into the sun. Let's see, what else? Can I not? Oh, there we go. Actually, maybe I should stop here.